Speaking of people who crap at their own jobs, as social media says, ladies and gentlemen, Wayne Bennett, he's rubbish now. You remember Wayne Bennett? He won all the trophies, but he's rubbish.
Super coach.
Super coach Wayne Bennett. Here are some people. Keith says, I asked, what would you change? Keith says, the head coach and a couple of players who can play centre. On a similar line, Fat Boy Rob says, so go back 6 weeks and pick some bats. Chris also says, get rid of the coach. So England, Great Britain are back. The Great Britain Rugby League Lions, as we have to give them their full title, are back and lost to the ramshackle Tonga Invitational XIII, who pretty much all play in the NRL, apart from a couple of them who play over here. And we've brought all these new kits out, and we've gone back to the 1990s, and we've gone back to the 1990s by losing test matches.
We need a sense of perspective.
What?
And I think the first thing we need to acknowledge is that Tonga was superb.
Without doubt.
And that my reservation about Tonga as they started to come through was that they were a 60-minute team.
Mm-hmm.
They were a big side who ran out of gas. First thing I would say is they're a very skillful team now. They have got that mix between power and creativity, and I actually thought, and again, you should never judge from a television picture because you don't see the full panoramic view, but I thought Tuilola here was probably the man of the match because he varied the play between the brilliance of their forwards and the skill of their backs. They proved to us, with the way they played on Saturday, that they were worthy of being the fourth ranked nation in the world, that they possibly now should be regarded as a tier 1 nation.
Yeah.
I also think that they are physically the biggest team in the world, and if you have your biggest forward go off after 12 minutes, which not enough was made of, and you play effectively with 16 men, so Alex Walmsley has to play longer minutes than he would have done, and not only that, but the guy who comes off has been your best forward all year, and just been the man of the match in the grand final. That's going to have a massive impact, irrespective of anything else. So I think there are other things we need to talk about.
But then that's what people forget, isn't it?
But that was lost in all of the, it's a disaster for Great Britain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, isn't it? Like, nobody's ever going to be happy with the selection. Nobody's ever going to be happy with the team they put out, the starting lineup, the bench, whatever else. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether he was the best prop in the league this season or not, you lose a prop, you lose a forward. Now as a prop, and I know I don't play the men's game, but it's the same idea. Our job is to go out for 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe a little bit longer in the men's team now, and put in an absolute performance, blow everything you've got, out the tank, get off, have a break, do it all over again. Now you can't do that when Alex Walmsley, who we need to remember has come back from a major injury, and whether it's been a season or not, it still takes its time to get back into the flow of it. And he will be looking forward to next pre-season to then feel like he's back to himself, I'm sure. Much like people do after injury. Like Ryan Hall's not there yet, or he's on the cusp or has come back from injury and whatnot. But you lose that ability to have somebody go in and put in a shift and come back off again. And then you have to manage your team much differently, much better. After only 12 minutes of playing probably the most physical team in the world, which everyone says we have this whole Tongan Invitational, they're not, Super League, they're not this. They're made up of NRL players. They're made up of some of the best players of our game.
Some of those players would get into the Australian team without question.
Exactly, and it's just like, if you strip it back and look at who we're playing, and Tui played an absolutely phenomenal game, and I think because they are such a band of brothers, when there's this whole sense of, they were in camp together, they may not see each other, but Connie's gone back and he's back with his best mate again, and there's a real sense of, whether it be a family or one big team, they're trusting each other. When they were throwing that ball around for that try, somebody was there every single time.
The difference effectively was that try.
Yeah.
And again, if that had been scored by Australia, we would have been lauding that.
Yeah.
Time immemorial. I think the other thing is they've been together as a team since 2017, so they don't play very often. but those combinations already work. And I think that, the great thing for Tonga was they brought in an 18-year-old at fullback at very short notice, and he was probably the second best player on the field.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Which is great, because what you want is this Tongan, almost. The Tonga have changed what international rugby league looks like, and we now possibly have a fourth team that could win the World Cup in 2021. My worry was that they would, as people like Tamalolo and Fafita retired, who would come in? Well, we've already seen a couple of young kids coming in who can play a little bit, which is great. But that's exactly what Great Britain didn't have. They didn't have any combinations. This was the first time that this group of players had played together.
Yeah.
And again, without being critical in any way of individuals, because I don't think you can do that if you're not at the game. I think it's very hard to do it watching a little box in your living room. Two of the players who played in our spine, to me, looked like one had played too much rugby and one hadn't played enough. And Josh Hodgson looked like a guy who's put everything into his domestic season, completely driven Canberra to a grand final, and then had to overcome the psychological trauma of that team not quite winning the grand final. 3 times I think he kicked out on the last tackle and gave away 7 tackle sets, which again, you don't really want to do against a team like Tonga. I'm not blaming him for the defeat, I'm just saying he didn't play at a level that we've seen him play all season. And to me, Gareth Widdop didn't look like he'd played enough rugby league, because obviously he's missed a lot of the season, but there's no combination there yet.
But then how can you expect an NRL player to play at the same level as, or vice versa, a Super League player to play at the same level as an NRL player? Whether we want to admit it or not, the game is still quite far. The difference is still quite big, isn't it? And we've seen the likes of John Bateman and Elliot White go over there, and they've made a real impact in Canberra's game. But they would admittedly say they've had to step up their game. And I always go back to the whole. When Sam Burgess, years and years ago, when he was 21 years old, went out to Sydney and spent his first season injured because he couldn't handle the physicality and the speed, and thought that he'd just gone from Bradford and whatever else. And that is still the same now, that the speed, the physicality of the NRL will take its toll on you. And that's what you saw. But how can you then expect Hodgson to play alongside, to talk with Jackson Hastings, who I think, when he actually did get the ball...
Did all right?
Yeah.
But he was subservient to Widdop, who clearly was the chief playmaker in the team, which you would be on your debut. But it looked to me as though when it got to the latter stages of the game, Hastings probably should have had a bit more of the ball.
Yeah.
But I thought there were positives for Great Britain. I thought Jermaine McGilvery had his best game of the season. I thought he played at a different level to how he's played at Huddersfield this year. And that might be nothing to do with him, it's just that Huddersfield as a team struggled. But there's clearly something about playing for Wayne Bennett that inspires the best.
But then also he said he came out of the World Cup Nines a little bit disappointed in his performance and was looking forward to getting back to 13s.
I thought James Graham was outstanding on his 50th cap, because he is.
It's James Graham, isn't it?
He is. And again, Bateman, who's had this long season, his stats are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the try scored.
What is he, 22, 23 or something ridiculous like that?
But, hindsight is a wonderful thing. With the knowledge that Thompson would have gone off early, you might have had Darryl Clark on the bench just to vary things up.
But then you don't plan for injury, do you?
You don't.
Which is what people need to remember.
And I just think that we've overreacted to the first time that this... I think there's bigger issues about Great Britain, and that I'm still not sure that everybody out there thinks of this as England. Yeah. We've got the same head coach, we've got virtually the same squad of players.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of variations that are there. Lachlan Coots represented Scotland, and that's about it. That's about it, really. It's England.
It would have been nice to see the likes of Regan Grace. He's had a fantastic season, and he is skillful. He is rapid. He has played really well. And I don't know if it's positionally, but I feel like, in the nines, he went well in the nines. He was, Wales' standout player. He's just looked like he had so much more to give, as if he hadn't had a heavy season, which, in the forward pack, you generally have more of a... that's the way that the rugby league is, isn't it? The middles do a lot of the bashing and the backs do a lot of the flying. So I would have liked to have seen him in it, but I would have liked to see myself in, going to Papua New Guinea, but I'm not. So, the end of story. Deal with it.
I just thought it was a bit of a hysterical overreaction. Great Britain lost, but
it's all Coote and Hastings talk.
for
They're not
international
born in Britain.
yeah, for
That's like
international
Fafita
rugby
was born
league,
in Tonga. You say.
I genuinely think that Tonga winning is fantastic for building up to a World Cup. I think the interesting thing this weekend will be twofold. One, to see how England respond to playing a New Zealand team that's Great Britain is coming off a loss. So there's two teams, both with a point to prove. I think the other interesting thing is how will Tonga go against Australia? Can they do it for 2 weeks running? Because the sign of a really good team and a team, if it is ever going to do anything in a tournament, that's got to do it on quarter-final, semi-final, final, is can you back that up? And I think we can reassess the performances for this week when we see how the teams go next week. But I don't want Wayne Bennett sacked and 3/4 of the team sent home. So obviously that'll be an unpopular view.
We haven't had the players that get sent home yet, can we? So place your bets on that one. Terry says no plan B. We tried to match them for power and then no flair.
But I think part of our problem was not having Luke Thompson for the bulk of the game.
I think part of the problem was who took charge on that field, because a lot of that game, it was the first half was very much middle dominated, but we didn't get much success. There was some very silly errors when the ball did come out, as if it was a bit panicky, because I didn't feel like initially there was somebody taking real control, or that talk between your nine and your halves as to what is going on. And I think they were very reliant on somebody, but when you've not played together, who takes control and where's the confidence in to say, let's do this without it being, like a counteracted by the side.
When you made your international debut,
mm-hmm.
Did it feel different running out there for the first time? Were you nervous? Were you?
I remember it obviously, but it was funny because I hated every single second of it, because I let the occasion, and if somebody said to me, jump, I would have just done it, whether that was the right thing to do or not. Whereas in the World Cup, I had a really big influence of knowing my role, and I was so confident with what my role was. If somebody said do this, I would have just taken the ball, and instead of passing it like I'd been told to do, I assess the situation much better, and I know that under pressure my passing isn't always 100%. So why take the risk if I'm not thinking? The rule is, if I'm not thinking 80-90% success, I'm going to take the ball and crash it up, gathering players, and that was the difference of in really understanding and not being forced by other players to pass the ball unnecessarily or to be in a position I shouldn't necessarily be in.
So the second time you played, or the third time, you were more attuned to international rugby league?
Yes, the first tour
so
I did.
Don't we need to apply that to some of these players who are playing in their first game, rather than say, right, the first 40 minutes wasn't what I was expecting, send them home?
Well, that's it. Like, do you know what? If that had been the same in the women's game, I would never have played for England again. But it's not just, how many of these men have actually played for Great Britain, and the amount of pressure and kind of the emphasis that's being put on this Great Britain. Who doesn't want to play for Great Britain? We've brought it back in. It's this prestigious team. It's come out of the, of the cupboard, and it's something to really look forward to. You've played for England, but now can you get that? It is that next step, isn't it? What an honour, and like the weight of previous Great Britain teams gone by. How is that not meant to be pressure? And then you're playing against Tonga, and I don't care who you are, you can't help but sometimes be a Tongan fan, especially with their crowd.
Well, that was the thing, that irrespective of whether the stadium was full or not, there were other competing attractions on the day that meant it was probably never going to.
Yeah.
But when you were watching it on television, I cannot imagine what it must have been like to be amongst it.
You could hear it, couldn't you?
The atmosphere never lessened. The singing of the hymns, the almost shrieking support from...
I think that was Mrs. Horton.
For every one of the 80 minutes. What, when Jake Connor came? That must be, again, and until you've experienced it, you can't know how you're going to respond to it. Absolutely. And they obviously thrive on it. Mm-hmm. The sippy towel, again, like, you're watching it on telly from 12,000 miles away and you're almost hiding behind the settee. What it must be like to be facing that before you take the first tackle in on your debut. I can't imagine. But I think we're asking too much of.
But it's like, if you think
certain
about
players.
it, Conrad Hurrell is a big fan's favourite over here, regardless of what team you support. He's an absolute cannonball. He's difficult. He makes meters. He puts in big tackles. I don't think he was that great himself individually, but obviously he's on the winning team, so his performance is by the by.
Funnily enough, I thought Conrad had his best game of the year because the one thing he didn't do was he didn't make a mistake. Whereas all year domestically, for every couple of things he's done that have been brilliant, there's been the odd knock on his own quarter that's put his team under pressure. I just thought he realised he was a late inclusion.
Yeah.
That nothing gave him greater pride to
Nothing,
pull on
yeah.
that shirt again, and he was going to do everything he could not to let his teammates down. And I don't know if the stats will say.
But then he didn't move the ball as much as he could do. His defensively,
Defensively,
he
he was astonishing. He made some good meters.
Yeah. But in his
But he
meters he
didn't
made,
make a mistake.
he carried the ball like a middle.
Yeah.
He didn't carry the ball like a centre
But
or
it's
like an edge.
like you were saying, you would have done in your second test match. You played to his strengths.
Yeah, but then as a centre, is it not your job? If you're on the edge, if you're on an edge, you need to work on them 2-on-1s. You need to work on that last pass, drawing the defence. Your job as a centre is to make the yards and then to get away with that last pass.
Josh Johnson's birthday on Thursday. Sorry, I
Happy birthday, Joe.
didn't realise you were in the middle of. But he made 7 kicks. I didn't realise he kicked the ball the most of the England players. But it's
Yeah,
on.
why? When you've got such.
Well, that's the mysterious thing, because he did it in the World Cup as well. I remember watching and thinking, why is he kicking the ball? Not that Josh Johnson isn't a great rugby league player, but that's not what he does.
I don't know.
Well, he
as a
can
character.
kick 40-20s.
Is he a dominant player in that respect? You know, for everybody, like, I don't know him as a character. Is that just? So I know in the World Cup, Andrea Dobson, whatever she said goes. She was a captain, but you backed her because generally her decisions were the same with Lois. Is that the type of character he is? Whatever he says goes type of thing, because that's where he needs to take a step back and go, but I always need your input.
I was randomly looking for something on Sky on YouTube the other day, and there was a Leeds Castlewood game from what was Weldon Road in the olden days, with our colleague playing wearing number 6 for Leeds, and someone had kicked a 40-20, but it was before 40-20s existed. It was just a normal scrum. It was very dull. In the old days when Castlewood used to wear amber and black as opposed to orange, they're all kicking off because the new kits
It
are out.
wasn't a Premiership semi-final.
It's just a regular game on Sky. In the old days, it was just weird at the end of some video on YouTube I was watching.
So what would you do now if it?
Is that the coach? Bring in Wigan Grace.
Wayne's gone. He's put you in charge.
Yeah, you're in charge now. Congratulations.
What changes would you make for New Zealand? Bearing in mind
Yeah.
again that they're going through a slightly transitional phase at the moment, and we'll talk about Australia in a minute because they frighten me at the moment. So we're talking about a New Zealand team that we know is coached by Mark Maguire. That makes them generally difficult to beat. They're on home soil, which again is a slightly different proposition to playing in Australia. Their halves have come under immense criticism, but on their day are 2 of the most talented players that we've seen in a modern era.
Yep.
What changes do you make to the Great Britain team for the test, and will you be up at 4 o'clock in the morning with your Greg's breakfast sandwich?
Well, Greg's won't be open by then.
Well, you get it
24
down
hour
before
window.
and put it in the
Oh,
microwave.
no. Well, we've got, there's things that's out of our control now. So you've got Jake Connor going to have to come in for Oliver Gildart, which is a shame.
It is, but Connor does offer something.
But then I don't think it's a bad exchange. Darryl Clark obviously would be. I think he's.
I'd have him on the bench because he gives you an option.
See, I guess he's not much more of a. He's much more of a off the cuff, isn't he? He just plays what he sees. Obviously you've got set plays and stuff like that, but I think he's very good at you've got to follow him and you've got to do what he's a little bit unpredictable in the best possible way, in the sense that he will just see something and go. So I think Darryl Clark would be a good option. He doesn't really seem to tire either, I don't think.
I'd have Johnny Lomax at 6.
Yeah.
Terry's asked if you think the squad is too slow We have lost the fastest back we had in Gildart, so we will definitely not outpace the Kiwis, says Terry. Slowing the Nines.
Yeah, I don't think they looked
Well, that
too
goes back
scary
to
in the 90s.
that goes
did
back
they?
to Regan Grace.
Yeah.
That maybe one
I
of our
just-
wing options should have been an out-and-out speedster.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would say, and I'm no coach, so therefore my opinion actually is completely null and void. But when you've got the fastest man in Super League, possibly one of the fastest men in the game, he is ridiculous in space. I'm not sure why he didn't. But again, I'm not Wayne Bennett, I'm not, there's various coaches out there, aren't there, that must have... Wayne Bennett hasn't done this on his own, that's what you need to remember. Wayne Bennett would not have sat in the room on his own and got everybody. He would have sat and consulted Jamie Beacock and Watson and Wardy and said...
And Kevin Sinfield.
Yeah, and said, look, and I'm sure that was a discussion, it wasn't just a one man, so stop blaming the one man. He has the final say, I'm sure, but I don't think any coach in the world does everything on their own. So there's a combination of different opinions that have chosen that, and the only one I'm really disappointed in is Regan Grace, but I just think he's class. But yeah, I would have put him, I would have put Darryl on. Lomax's, but then Lomax's size, I went against Tonga, Lomax's size would have worried me. Because I think when he scoops and goes to the middle, he doesn't always make great yards, does he? Because he just gets... he's a bit of a Caitlin Beavers. If he doesn't get that space, then he's crushed and crumbled. I don't know, where does Blake Austin fit in?
That's true. If you're going to take him, you should play him, shouldn't you?
As James says, if only Tom Johnston was fit. Be back in red, white and blue next year. That's the only red, white and blue that
Don't know
matters.
if Germans are allowed to
Germans.
play for
Germans.
Great Britain, are they?
Andy says, Ratu, get him in. We said we should have taken him to the Nines. We said that on this programme. He's probably too busy with the army these days, but there you go.